Mankani challenges Dawkins' accusation that religious people presume the faith they are born into is the true faith. He argues that many verses in the Quran actually command people to question their forefathers' faith. He contends that if someone follows religion superficially without following its scripture, they cannot truly be called religious, and their delusion should not be blamed on God or scripture. Mankani points out that Islam doesn't teach that only Muslims go to heaven, citing the Quranic verse, "Surely those who believe and those who are Jews and the Christians and the Sabians, whoever believes in Allah and the last day and does good, they shall have their reward from their Lord, and there is no fear for them, nor shall they grieve." While agreeing with Dawkins that a 6-year-old cannot be said to have a religion, Mankani counters that Dawkins wrongly attributes this view to religious people. He cites a hadith of Prophet Muhammad: "Every child is born upon fitra. It is her parents that make her a Jew or a Christian." Mankani claims that fitra means the innate knowledge of God's existence and acknowledgement of His unity. According to this view, all children are born with this knowledge, but parents' influence may divert them from this path. The essential point is that children aren't born into a specific religion, but with an innate disposition or fitra that guides them toward truth, which Islam considers to be the true religion aligned with human nature. Mankani then criticizes Dawkins' stance on the Catholic Church's sexual abuse scandals, noting that Dawkins appears unusually sympathetic toward the church. He quotes Dawkins saying that it is clearly unjust to visit upon all pedophiles vengeance appropriate to the tiny minority who are also murderers, and that he should have felt obliged to come to their defense regarding pedophiles hounded decades later. Mankani suggests Dawkins' relatively softer stance on pedophilia might stem from his moral position on issues like homosexuality, his consequentialist morality, or his bias against religious prohibitions. He criticizes Dawkins' argument that religious indoctrination causes more psychological harm than sexual abuse. Quoting Dawkins' statement, "Horrible as sexual abuse no doubt was, the damage was arguably less than the long term psychological damage inflicted by bringing the child up Catholic in the first place." Mankani counters that in Dawkins' worldview, teaching children about God, afterlife, heaven, and hell is child abuse, while teaching them there is nothing beyond physical existence isn't. He argues that this worldview leads to ideologies like capitalism and imperialist actions like the Iraq War, producing individuals who can justify massive civilian casualties. He concludes that if Dawkins truly cared about psychological damage to children, he would consider the trauma caused by war, arguing that children are less scared of hell than they are of being blown to bits. Mankani dismisses Dawkins' sharing of correspondence with atheist fans as containing no arguments against God. He specifically addresses actress Julia Sweeney's statement about how she replaced God with gravity and angular momentum in her understanding of how the Earth orbits the Sun. He argues that substituting God with the laws of physics is pointless because those laws themselves require explanation. Quoting Edward Fraser, he states that saying we can explain everything else by tracing them down to those fundamental laws, but those laws themselves have no explanation whatsoever, is problematic. Mankani identifies several problems and issues with this view. It violates the principle of sufficient reason, rejects the theist's explanation without justification, and creates a logical problem wherein if fundamental laws have no explanation, then they cannot explain anything else. He uses Fraser's analogy. Explaining phenomena through an unexplained law is like placing a book on a shelf and that shelf on two brackets, but then letting go of the brackets in midair and expecting the book and shelf to stay afloat. Only something that is self-explanatory, purely actual without parts, has existence as its essence, can provide ultimate explanations. Mankani examines Dawkins' suggestion that religion should be taught for its cultural value without requiring belief in the supernatural. He quotes Dawkins' conclusion, "We can give up belief in God while not losing touch with a treasured heritage." Mankani argued this is precisely the kind of religion practiced in Western societies today. He claims Western governments allow tremendous religious freedom for rituals and traditions as long as people, quote, "give up belief in God, specifically monotheism," unquote. People can pray, fast, and celebrate religious holidays but cannot challenge the capitalist society or question imperialist foreign policies. He contends that Western societies don't allow the kind of religious freedom that would let people criticize teaching concepts opposed to divine systems. such as the idea of multiple genders or drag shows in primary schools. He argues that protesting against these isn't about imposing Sharia law but about protecting what's necessary for society's advancement towards godliness and actualization of human potential. This, Mankani concludes, is what the atheist wants to remove when saying we can give up belief in God.